All right, let's continue. I just got rid of the pot still, right? You get that, because last topic we talked about was cooling management and the problems I have with this innovation from, with all due respect, southern Germany, 1870 fruit brandy. Variability, non-repeatability, aka not possible to make quality product consistently. So, no quality product. What is the solution that we came up with? Liquid management. What we basically did is we got rid of this whole gas throughput phase. We beefed up the capacity of the deflagmator, and instead of calling it something stupid like deflagmator, we called it what it is, column cooler. So we have a column, and we put a cooler on top of it, water in, water out. And instead of sort of manipulating the water flow and hoping nobody has to go to the loo, hoping that the weather stays the same, hoping that the seasonal influences are minimal or brought under control, however you want to do that, we basically cool all the gases back to liquids. We cool all the gases that rise from the boiler in liquid management, in an iStill, back to liquids. That means that cooling is only essential in the way that there needs to be enough cooling to cool all the gases back to liquid. How warm the coolant is doesn't really matter. Well, if it's colder, it's more efficient. You need less coolant to cool down all the gases. But even if the coolant is warmer one day or one season than the other, it doesn't have an influence on flavor. And it doesn't have an influence on flavor because we're going to cool back all the gases to liquid. How about room temperature? Variety. Doesn't have an influence either. Wow, how about pressure? How about somebody flushing the toilet again? This is the last time I'm going to name that example, by the way, and my water pressure drops for 4 or 5, maybe 6 seconds. Who cares? As long as there's enough coolant in the system to cool all the gases down to liquid again, we don't have any variability. That leaves, if you listen carefully, only one influencer, potentially outside of control, that influences cuts, that influences flavors, that influences vapor speeds, and that influences the quality of the product you can make and the repeatability with which you're going to make it. No more cooling temperature difference, no more distilling hall temperature differences, no more coolant pressure issues. So 3 out of 4 variables, muddiers, are thrown out of the window. We only have one left, and that is air pressure. Remember, we spoke about air pressure being the 4th variable that mashes up basically the system. We just went down from 4 confusers down to 1, which makes liquid management a far better solution for the craft distiller that wants to make quality product consistently. Less outside influences outside of your control. More control means easier to make the same product over and over again. Hit that target you were aiming for with your whiskey, vodka, rum, gin, whatsoever. All right, gases rise up, hit the cooler, everything gets cooled down. So what we basically need is a system to scoop up the liquids. The gases flow through, and the liquids assemble on the plates. So instead of having gases come out and cool them back, we have liquids come out. And what we pretty cleverly did, if I may say so, is we put a robot here. And the robot closes and opens a valve in the liquid outlet. Now imagine that we close that robot. No liquids get out, so this plate fills up, overflows, and we get a redistillation the same way we got a redistillation in a more traditional system with cooling management. So all of a sudden, close the robot completely, we get pure reflux, nothing comes out, we can get a very high proof, lot of purity. Push the heads and tails away, make a very pure product like a vodka. Or we can open up the robot completely, All the liquids that we create go out. What we basically now have is, instead of a vodka still, a pot still. It does one distillation, just like the traditional pot still that I sort of drew before. But the fun thing is that we have got a lot of control over that robot. What we basically can do is open and close the robot in 2,500 steps between fully open and fully closed, creating 2,500 positions of a certain amount of product coming out and a certain amount of product, reflux, being redistilled for higher proof, better separation, less smearing, more purity, higher ABV. No control issues, no external influencers, basically, and I'm going to show you the unit for a second here. A very simple robotized design that sits to the side of the column, and of course it's packaged when you get your iStill in, so you don't really see it, it's covered up. But basically imagine that the liquids flow out here and then go to your product, your cut selector, heads, hearts and tails. But if we close this or open it, we can actually manipulate in steps of 0.01 millimeters the amount of redistillation we need and the amount of product per hour we get out. So there's a few advantages there. Cooling, water cooling medium doesn't have an effect anymore. So the number of confounders goes back from 4 to 1, only air pressure. So it's easier to create better product consistently. But also because the robot has such a tremendous range, this will never be a pot still. You need to sort of take the plates out for it to function like a pot still. You need to completely turn this off to have it something like a pot still. This is simply a pot still if you open the robot. If you want to turn this into a vodka still, you need to make the column very, very long for a lot of redistillations, a lot of separation power, a lot of control over the final vapor speeds to make sure you don't get heads and tail smearing and create a one-dimensional vodka. With this system, you don't have to change anything. The column stays the same, the robot stays the same, but based on your instructions, it will just close a little bit more to make sure that it gets to the purity where it needs to be. So the range in which the liquid management robotized system works, really modern equipment, 21st century, is much wider, much broader. How it helps you target to get the same product over and over again is really ×4 compared to the difficulty of a cooling management system. And that is why I don't like cooling management and why we designed our own system. Air pressure, the only variable that screws things up. So the moment we started to launch the iStill, some 7 years ago, we started another project. And that project was basically, how do we get air pressure under control? What we did already quite a few years ago is develop our own air pressure sensor. Air pressure sensor sits in the computer of your iStill and per second measures the air pressure. Every second measures the air pressure at this very moment. And if the air pressure changes, 0.1, 0.2, the automation automatically changes your cut points. So if the boiling point of ethanol goes from 78.3 to 78, because of a difference in air pressure, automatically the cuts for heads, hearts and tails and the power that goes into the system in terms of creating the same vapor speeds in a situation where there's a different air pressure are automatically compensated for. 4 confusing variables that are outside of your control make it impossible for a craft distiller to make quality product consistently. This system, you can do it each and every day, time and again. And as a byproduct, an extra advantage of liquid management, there is that whole range of products you can make now. Fruit brandy, low vapor speeds, vodka, a lot of redistillations for purity, or a 3-dimensional rum or whiskey with a lot of pot still style smearing at the back end. You just open the robot a bit more, or you close it a bit more. Or, if you look at our automation, you just choose the programs where it does so for you automatically. So we discussed in the previous videos how Column sizing is important, how column management systems are important. But what happens to that reflux that we create in a cooling management system or that we create in a liquid management system like the iStill? Because if it just falls back down to the boiler, it needs to be redistilled again and it's very inefficient. So people have come up with internal structures to a column in order to make sure that the reflux we create with our management system, cooling management or liquid management, doesn't fall back directly but actually has a chance of being redistilled in that column. And let's start with the more traditional approach. Right, the white column for the fruit brandy, the deflagmator that sits here, and then the gases that are allowed out. What happens to the reflux? Well, traditionally what is used is a plated still. So you have to imagine that inside this still, let's just draw there are three additional plates. Now, if these were solid plates, the gases wouldn't be able to rise up from the boiler. You would create pressure issues. So what they basically do is two things. Either put bubble caps on them, or, and it's either one or the other, but I'm going to draw it in one design, create little holes inside the plate. Let's say this is easier to make, that this system has two perforated plates and one bubble cap plate. Now normally your system is going to be either bubble cap plates or perforated plates, but since their working are pretty similar, with slight exceptions here and there, I want to draw them in one machine. Now, since there's holes in your perforated plate, all of a sudden the gases that rise up from the boiler find a way through. But because those holes are small, the moment we put a deflagmator on and we start cooling, remember, traditional system, we create reflux, liquids that fall back. And what happens to liquids that fall back on these plates with perforated holes? They can't drain that easy because, well, the holes are small, right? So there needs to be a liquid buildup to create enough liquid pressure to push liquids back to the boiler. So basically, by creating perforated plates, we create a hold-up situation for the liquid. So whatever we cool as gases falls back and creates a liquid bath on top of that perforated plate. That liquid bath is kept in place by the gas pressure, the vapor pressure from the boiler. So basically, the moment we stop distilling, we turn off the heater, we turn off vapor creation, these liquids will drain. But as long as we keep on distilling and have the deflagmator on, what basically happens is that the gases that have to now come through have to find a way through that liquid layer. And in doing so, they exchange energy, and guess what? They lose energy. So the ones that go up to the next plate, in general, are the lighter fractions, the low boiling point alcohols. By redistilling, creating more plates, more redistillations, by returning reflux that we create with, in this case, cooling management, what basically happens is that we redistill. One distillation in a pot still, but with a plate, we add a distillation cycle. With two plates, we add two distillation cycles. With 3, 4, 5 plates, all of a sudden we do 3, 4, 5 distillations in one system. As long as we create a liquid layer on that perforated plate. You can imagine that the boil up of gases, the rise up of gases through that layer of liquid that creates resistance is not a gentle process. So you see a lot of boil up, a lot of action going on. So these stills traditionally have little windows where you can look in and see what goes on inside. And you see all the activity on the plates and liquids bubbling and boiling. And you think, wow, that looks interesting. It's really separating, and it really is separating. But this also creates an issue, because as these droplets shoot up, they have a tendency of infecting the next plate. Perforated plate, bubble plate as well. And that means you can get something that is called entrainment where instead of gases moving up from one plate to the other up to become more pure and more purified, we also now get sometimes droplets of liquid traveling up, contaminating the next plate up. And this is an inefficiency. And to compensate for that inefficiency, there needs to be a lot of space between plates so that the droplets that form fall back on that same plate instead of travel up into the next plate. Entrainment, prevention takes place by creating a lot of space between the plates. And that's okay with 2 or 3 plates, but now imagine that you're height restricted or money restricted and you want to make vodka. You need to do 14, 15, 16 redistillations. Maybe you need 14, 15, 16 plates. Maybe you need 14, 15, 16 feet, 5, 6 meters of column on top of your boiler, or maybe next to your boiler, which is not very efficient either, in order to hit your desired outcome percentage. It's an old technology, right? 1870s. This is the fruit brandy still, traditionally. The difference between the perforated plate and the bubble caps is that the bubble caps, the gases go through these little mushrooms and then like that. So if we start to cool, liquid falls down, we get a liquid layer, we have one mushroom upside down so that if the liquid gets too high, it overflows and goes back to the other plate. So the difference between a perforated plate and a bubble cap plate is basically the fixation of the liquids. If you stop distilling with a bubble cap, there will always be a layer of liquid left on your plate. The liquid layer is independent of the vapor, speed, the pressure from the gases from the boiler. It doesn't automatically drain, which means it's more difficult to clean, but it also means something else. Bubble caps were invented together with the deflagmator, again in southern Germany. You can still see that the players on the world level, on a national, international level, all come from southern Germany, fruit brandy country. Because what those layers do, especially the very, very fixed layers, like on a bubble cap, is they prevent tails from coming over to the next plate. As long as we don't get entrainment, no droplets making it over, what basically happens is that we create a liquid lock that prevents tail smearing. Because on the lower plates, with the higher temperatures, because still a lot of water in the alcohol mix, not very pure yet, the tails simply cannot make it over to the next plate. The real reason why bubble cap plates and cooling management was designed and why it was invented in fruit brandy country was simply because the fixed liquid layer is a perfect tails trap. You remember the two-dimensionality of fruit brandy? How we don't want any tail smearing because it will overpower the fragile flavors at the front end? That's what you need. But now, you look at your own still, or you think back about the talk you just had with a salesperson from one of those companies, and you're like, so why the heck am I buying this if I want to make whiskey? And that's a good question. Because what nobody tells you, but I feel you should know, and understand completely, is that if you buy a fruit brandy optimized system, it's optimized for a two-dimensional front-of-mouth product. This product is not suited for whiskey or rum or gin, and basically not allowed for vodka anymore either. So sometimes my question has been, I was in London a few years ago, gave a presentation to I think 70 or 80 distillers at an event, and I asked them like, so how's fruit brandy doing in England? I think amazingly well, right? There's a growth of fruit brandy distilleries, and they're like, fruits in England? You've seen our climate? We're not, yeah, well, apples, a little bit of pears, but that's about it. No, we like to make gin. And then the Scots said, and we like to make whiskey. And some said, we want to make rum actually. So my question in return was, so why the heck do you buy fruit brandy stills? Well, because the salesperson told me it's also good for rum making. I don't need to double distill like on a pot still. I can do it in one go. It's modern technology. Yeah, my ass. Modern technology from the 1870s. This isn't modern technology, it's old technology. This is from the time when your great-great-grandfather drove to work on a horse instead of with a car. Don't get fooled, guys. This is fruit brandy technology, nothing else. We designed a plated still. The reason we did is because the market is divided from pot stills to plated stills to hybrid stills like our traditional model, the one with the robot I just showed. We created a plated still simply because there is huge demand for plated stills, because not everybody wants to drive a car. Some people really like horses and carriages, and if they do, and it's 50% of the market, who are we to continue to say like, yeah man, that's arrogant, right? You're stupid for not listening to us. If you want a plated still, we'll make you a plated still. Guess what we did? We got rid of the cooling management. Our plated stills are liquid management driven. They have the robot in there that actually really, really securely manages the amount of reflux that goes on plates. Benefits of both worlds? Yeah. Bubble caps, no go. I mean, if you come here and you say, the only thing I want to make is fruit brandy, maybe we'll make it for you. But I prefer, if you want to go plates, perforated plates. And the reason why perforated plates are better is that they allow for some smearing. It won't give you a three-dimensional product like the robotized version I showed you earlier. It won't give you a full-bodied flavored rum or whiskey like a traditional pot still. But it will give you at least half a dimension, 2.5. Where this technology only gives you a two-dimensional drink. One category only that benefits from that, and that is basically only fruit brandy. So be careful, guys, because remember we talked about bourbon? Bourbon, I was saying, used to be a whiskey. Traditionally, or by definition, if you look at it, it is a whiskey. But if you taste it, it tastes like a fruit brandy. There are still a few bourbons out there that are actually made on pot stills, and you know which ones I talk about. Try them. They've got three-dimensional tastes and flavors. They last in your mouth for a very long time. And then nowadays, most of the bourbon, I would say about 90 to 95%, is distilled with fruit brandy stills. And guess what the outcome is? Two-dimensional whiskey. If you like it, no problem. But call it a bourbon. It's not really a whiskey anymore. Not in its flavor profile, not in its definition of where it sits. If you buy a system like this, traditional fruit brandy still, because some guy from Germany actually told, or China nowadays tells you like, oh yeah, it's amazing, a new technology relative to a pot still. That's from the 1200s, this is from 1870. Realize that you limit yourself tremendously in the product you can make. And that's a really, really big takeaway, because these are expensive investments. Any still you buy is an investment for a long term. You better buy something that actually helps you make the product you want to make. I think a pot still is better than this unless you want to make fruit brandy. Okay. What I didn't like about the bubble caps I already spoke about, and what I don't really like about plated systems in general is the entrainment. So the impurities in liquid form that come over from a lower plate to a higher plate, and the fact that you need space. You basically need around a foot, 30-35 centimeters, to make sure you don't get that entrainment. And that means that if you do more distillation, your column gets very high, gets very heavy, gets very inefficient because it loses energy the higher you go, and everything starts to fall apart. So we invented something new, and I'm going to show you that in a minute. You can probably see it, I can take it out otherwise. These are simple springs, and I've got two sizes here. We have, I think, 3 or 4 sizes at the moment, depending on still and column size. And basically what these are springs, if they want to come out. And they're 90% open space. I don't know if you can see them. 90% open space. What that means is that if we fill a column, not with this technology, but basically with springs, what happens is that in that column, there's a lot of springs there. I can't draw them all, but imagine that it's full with springs. It's 90% open. So all the gases rise through, no problem. Remember that robot? If we've got it full open, we've got that column cooler here, because we think liquid management is, well, it's not actually an opinion. We don't think that. We know that liquid management is such a much better management technology for you to create quality products over and over again. So let's say the robot is open, everything gets scooped out and goes back. We now have a pot still. If we start to close the robot and reflux starts to return from the plate back to the column, instead of having plates there, I mean, we have a plated column. I explained that to you because 50% of the markets loves those machines, and if you already have one in practice, you don't want to upgrade to a new technology, you want to stay close maybe to the old technology, we have it in-house. But if you look at a system that is more efficient and more variable, you don't need plates at all, you just need these springs in there. The more you return, the more of a portion of those springs are filled up with liquids. So we create a flexible liquid bath, like with the perforated plates, instead of a fixed liquid bath. But it is not limited to the number of perforated plates. Basically, you can put a large portion of the section into a liquid bath if you need a lot of redistillation for vodka. Or if you simply want to do a pot distillation, you don't return any reflux, all the product comes out directly and immediately. No liquid bath, pot still run. Vodka run, pot still run. And the fun is, you don't need to take anything out from these springs. Basically, by changing the setting of the robot or choosing the automated program that actually manages the robot, whiskey, vodka, gin, this system will automatically make sure that there is exactly the right amount of liquids, the right amount of reflux in your system in such a way that you get the exact purity and flavor profiles over that you need. And that's another invention that we did and we're pretty proud of. The advantage is that instead of having a column that is like 5, 6, 7 meters tall, 25, maybe 30 feet tall, we just have a column that is 1.5 meters high at max, which is under 5 feet. And it can do anything. Pot distill, double distill for a whiskey, triple distill if you want to make a lighter style Irish whiskey, or 20, 25, 30 redistillations if you want to make vodka. With our solution, the springs, Helicone column packing, Helicone column packing is what we call it, we can get a redistillation not every foot, not every 30, 35 centimeters, but every 2.5 centimeters. And that means it's like 14, 15 times more efficient at separating than traditional systems are. Not taking into consideration the amazing robot, not taking into consideration that liquid management already gave you a huge edge. Pot stills don't have any packing because there's no reflux management, there's just power management, right? This is the first thing that we spoke about when we dived into the first part of still design. Fruit brandy stills, plated stills have power management and traditionally cooling management. I explained to you, or try to explain to you very carefully, why cooling management is a very compromised solution and really not the way forward, and instead liquid management is a much better, a much safer, much more pinpointed and dedicated solution in any product. Third consideration I want you to think about is, do I need plates and what kind of plates? If you want to go fruit brandy, bubble caps is fine. Anything else, if it needs to be a plated still, perforated plates. And if you want to have more flexibility, make more products out of one machine, the whole suite, the whole range, you need a packed column with liquid management and robotized and automated controls over it.